Welcome to our Going Green podcast, and today we're going to have a look at one of the big problems of our time, which is air pollution. And we're seeing at the moment various sort of actions and suggestions on what we should do to try and improve this air pollution. I suppose most of the air pollution is actually caused by this great bane of our time, the motor car, and the sort of desperate need to try and get us away from using our motor cars and, well, basically getting on your bike or walking. And it's not just about the motor cars, it's also about planes. And I suppose we've seen over the last couple of years a change in the way that most of the world's been living due to the corona crisis. And what we've got is some people saying, yeah, I can see some changes going on here. Can we sort of keep it up?
Oh, yes, definitely in the air quality measure. Yeah, you're seeing over the pandemic, of course, those critical pictures from Delhi where you saw within a week it all cleared up and was sort of the lowest or cleanest air it has been for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, that's the major thing. But along with that, you saw suddenly when everybody went back to work, suddenly everybody got in their cars and suddenly the air pollution or the air quality, which is the measure of the air pollution, suddenly decreased or increased depending on which way around you put the danger levels, as in lots of pollution means low air quality.
Yeah. And we also saw only a few weeks ago in India the problems there where they were having to shut schools and a lot of workplaces just because the pollution levels were so high. And if you want to take it sort of to 100% is really bad pollution, they were at 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
And we haven't heard too much about that since, so we can only presume that it's gone back to sort of slightly better times, perhaps 90% or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, so very recently, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has started a new, I wouldn't say pledge or new thing. Basically, he's trying to do some new things, or more precisely, he's trying to do some old things differently. Is the way.
Yeah.
And what happened was in London, the low emission zone was created. They created the emission zone, and then they created the ultra low emission zone to sort of to basically stop cars going in these areas, or otherwise they get fined or they get taxed, I think is the answer.
And this is very much central London, isn't it? The
greater London.
Yeah. The basically central London, where they're trying to sort of, there's a lot of pollution, a lot of cars. You look at the speeds that people do in central London, and you find that it's barely faster than walking pace, because they drive quickly from one place to the next. That's one set of traffic lights to the next set of traffic lights, and they sit and wait. And I've walked along some roads in London, and I reckon I've done better than some of the cars on some days.
Yeah, and that's fair. You can see that. It's why a lot of the buses, they're on there. They've got all the, not the eco fuel, the green red buses, which is
the green red buses. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, they've got they're the hybrid ones. So they're running now on electricity, but obviously fuel tanks power the generator. Yeah, which is much better because they can basically start and stop no problem, which is great. The issue you'll find is it's where all the people live, and the people want to go somewhere. They've got to work. Let's say you live in central London and you live in the outskirts of London. When you're going to get there,
like we do, yeah.
Well, we're the opposite. We want to go into London as opposed to out.
Yes. But we live on the basic outskirts of London. We live outside what's called the M25, a circular motorway that runs around London. And Mr. Khan had this nice idea that he was going to own everything inside that, wasn't it, really?
The answer is he didn't know. So he's got several different policies, of what he should do. And one of them was actually expanding some of the emission zones, right? And they'll make the low emission zone bigger, so it restricts more of the central Greater London, and then push the emission zone further outside. And one of the plans, this is that they released, was to move the boundary to the M25, so that, let's say you turn off the M25 in towards London, that's when the emission zone starts, and that seems great and fantastic. But there was a major problem, which has been looked at and discussed with this policy in its public consultancy phase, was the fact that here we live outside the M25, no problem. The next town along to us, which is called Watford, that is inside the M25. So then, by travelling from Hemel to London, not Hemel to Watford, right, you would actually cross the M25. So therefore, under the policy that they're promoting, you would actually enter the emission zone, and therefore you get charged. But the problem is, we were never going into London in the first place. So why should we pay for a London-based tax or toll or charge when we're not even going towards London? Surely that money should go to Watford. But no. This plan was to do so for this. And then the easy thing is, how are they going to police this? Are we going to do the cameras with a little disc to make sure that every vehicle, right? Are you going to put a camera on every farm road that crosses the M25? And the answer was policing and doing this was going to be nightmarish, which is what they've said. So they're changing up and looking at reviewing not to do it there. But it's the idea that sort of, where do you start policing? Where do things start looking at? Is how we should all be going for, I say, emissions. How to police them, how to make places much better.
Yeah, we're all after trying to sort of improve the air quality. I like good air quality. I breathe it all the time, and I don't particularly want to breathe in all those particulates and all the other sort of gases and other bits and pieces. It's not just the particulates that are nasty, and believe me, they are nasty, and we've talked about those before, but it's also all those unseen things like the nitrogen oxides, as well as sort of sulfur oxides and other things.
It's all the car pollution stuff. And that's fair in regards to, you don't want that. And there is this air quality mixture. I was looking at the story from this, that did you know on Monday, people, because of the air quality index, people are advised not to actually exercise outside because of how high it was in the morning. And it's looking at those things and doing this, but you can't, like we saw, say, with in the coronavirus, the lockdowns, you can't just have this on-off switch. You've got to be able to sort of not live with it. That's the wrong way to describe it, but change the way things are working to help reduce things.
Well, we've now got more people working from home. In England at the moment, we still have work from home if possible.
Possibly, yeah. And that's helping reducing the cars. And that's great. Wonderful. That's fabulous.
Yeah, my wife says it's great. She doesn't waste 4 hours of travelling, and she travels in. She's pretty good. She goes in via the train, and then she uses the tube underground system and the overground system, which takes her to sort of nearly where she works, and then she decides that she's going to be good, and she gets off and walks an extra couple of stops, breathing in, of course, all those car fumes as she's going past, and that's not quite so healthy for her, actually, is it? No, but now she doesn't have to do that. there's two benefits. One, I suppose she can get up a little bit later. But the other great benefit she finds is that basically she doesn't have to do all this extra traveling. So she's not as tired and her work productivity has gone up. And so work's benefiting. When she does go into work, a lot of other people aren't there anyway. And when she does sort of want to talk to people, they talk on products like Zoom and other sort of Google thingies.
Yes.
I think actually they use a Microsoft thingy, but
yeah, and that's great and everything, and that's working, and lots of people are doing so. But you still can't get around that sort of. Quite a lot of people, unfortunately, like to do the school runs because it's sort of how do I transport X amount of kids the short distance, and that's what's driving things up. And but you've got to look at sort of, yes, London's doing a lot of things, but look at other urban areas. They're all trying to have the same. They have less traffic, obviously, but they're still having this sort of problem area that cars are causing issues.
I don't know. Have you ever driven through Birmingham in the rush hour? It makes London look just as no different than places like London. And I've been to some other major cities and I've driven through those in the rush hour. In fact, even Hemel Hempstead, which is not one of the world's biggest towns, it's taken me sometimes 4 hours to get to Watford.
Yeah, it can be. This is the point. It's all about sort of traffic, and then you go, all right. Are you trying to reduce the number of cars, or are you trying to reduce things like not journey times, but sort of how long people are idling and sort of not moving? A car running is probably better than a car just stationary, not doing anything. So
yeah,
you're wasting time. So that's the idea behind a lot of these measures, is to sort of, but they're looking at, city cars looking at ways to tax people or charge people for things, so they can do more development. This is where they can promote bicyclanes and sort of those sorts of things. But that needs to. Where does that money come from? The answer is obviously it's going to come from a charge somewhere on the motorists.
Yeah, me.
Wow. Not desperately you, because you don't unfortunately live in London.
But if I go into London,
they basically wants to do sort of what for road use. For every mile you travel in London, you have to pay for. Essentially, if you use the road, you have to pay for the maintenance of the road, which is fair enough. That's fine. There's no problem. And so, therefore, if you don't travel into London, then you don't pay.
Yet we already pay for every other road. We have our road fund licence where we pay to take our cars, and I pay road fund licence, and I use my car probably once a week if I'm lucky at the moment, and I'm paying for the right to use it 7 days a week, all day, every day, but I'm choosing not to.
So So these are these things to do so. It's just sort of not why is London special, but sort of why should London charge, I say, more, when surely, you could get other places could charge the sort of the same, like how about the Birmingham congestion charge? I imagine that'd be quite good.
And Manchester, and you could name every city.
Every city has a congestion charge, and sort of you do those and have not a national policy, but sort of a.
And if you go and visit some farm in the Cotswolds, there's also a very large congestion there as well.
I think that's called for the sheep crossing the road and causing.
That's something like that, yes. And are we going to just pay for that? Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So there are these huge, important things to sort of look at of how these things. But what are they've now charging this money and getting it. What are they going to do with it? What's the sort of the plans? And in London, obviously the plan is to create more bicycle lanes. It's to help, I say reduce bus times, but it's to increase the number of buses. So obviously the number of buses travelling is.
Well, you lived in London for about 3 years, didn't you? 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
4 years. You lived in London when you were at university, and you used most of the time buses to sort of move around. Or occasionally you use that anti-bus device, which is called your tricycle.
Yes, I used to cycle around, yeah, and that was great, and that was fine, and lots of people put the cycle lanes in, and it was one of those things where, it was all right. The problem you find is people like putting cycle lanes in. They don't actually think about where the cars are going to go instead. And so you're then mixing, which is not quite the point. Have you ever been in London, one of these cycle highways?
I certainly haven't. I get scared in London. I will be quite honest. I'm a coward. I don't like driving in London. I've driven in London. I don't like driving in London. We live close enough to London, and we live on a major train route into London that it's easier for me to get on a train 20 minutes later, if I get the right train. I'm in London. I can then use the tube network to get me where I want. And I don't think I'd like to actually arrive in London and get on my bicycle and then cycle round. I can. I've got one of these small folding bikes that's allowed on the train, and I could then cycle round there, but I'm still worried about the basic thing that I'm very close to cars which are going a lot faster than me.
Well,
and
depending on
where I am, I suppose I could be going a lot faster than them. But if I'm there, then I've always got the worry about every left turn that I'm cycling in, that a lorry decides it's going there, and that's the end of me.
Yeah, I know. It's an issue. It's one of those things we can't say. But anyway, these cycle highways or whatever they're all right. They're pretty good. I think there's like 6 of them or something. Or 6 at least they got planned and laid out and sort of expanding. Yeah, and they work. They like arteries. They've got different routes. I just find that sort of they're not well placed.
They don't go where you want to go.
Precisely. That's what I find wrong with them. Is more sort of, I'm always finding I have to go across a cycle lane as opposed to using one, if that makes sense.
Is it dangerous crossing a cycle lane, by the way?
Well, it depends on what time of the day it is. If it's morning rush hour with everybody cycling to work, you don't want to cross it because it's almost like a car, but they're constantly cycling and moving along.
And faster.
But the other thing is during the time of day, it gets easing up and it's relatively clear and relatively okay. It allows, it moves the cycles away from the road, which is great, and that's fine. The problem is, of course, there aren't many of them. If you're going to commit to a cycle lane or cycle path, or, the cycling network, then you've got to go and full force it. You've got to have all the little tiny roads and loops, as opposed to just having the highways. And then basically, if you want to have to go somewhere, you're going to have to say, I'm going to spend 5 seconds on it because I need to just turn left and turn right.
Living in Hell Hempstead, we've got some quite nice cycle pathways. And we do meet a few little problems on those. And what they've done in my town, and this is just having a little nag probably at the local council, is that they've got a path and they put a nice little white line down the middle, and one side is for cyclists and the other side is for pedestrians. Brilliant. Now, I don't know which one is which, and they're not labelled. They were originally. They might have had a little cycle, a little person painted on. They've long gone, and people don't know which one they're going to walk in, so they walk in one or the other. And of course, pedestrians do tend to sort of move from one lane to the other without warning. And as a cyclist, I'm coming along, bombing along, perhaps doing as much as 5 or 6 miles an hour. And they will just walk out in front of me. And I have to sort of use my bell.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to have to use your bell. You got to make them know that you're there. Who has the right of way on a cycle path? Is it the bicycles or is it the paid people? Don't know. Where they share lanes, it's obviously.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm a person, so I always believe that I try and give people as much room as I possibly can. Because I'm a person. When I get off my bike, I'm still a person.
Oh, yeah. But there's the other rise, of course, in I say in London, is the electric scooters.
Which are banned, aren't they?
I think they're banned. No, they're banned to run on
And pavements.
pavements. So then, where do you put them? The answer is
Private. Yes, yeah.
obviously cycle lanes. But you've got to look up the modes of transport. You've got to get people who are interested.
Things change, and they are better. It's like an electric bicycle. I don't have one, but there are, since I live in Hemel, which is basically is a valley, and the town centre is in the valley, and everyone else lives on either side. And if I want to go in through Hemel, I've got to go down a hill and back up the other side. And going downhill, I'm a really good downhill cyclist.
Upill's not.
But going uphill, then, a battery assisted bike is great. But of course, then we're thinking about back to the usual problems is it's got to be charged somehow. And can it be charged with renewables?
But also, it's not even sort of where how to charge it and what you're going to charge it with. It's where you're going to charge it. It's like the car problem. These electric car.
Yeah. But they do. I have seen various places for cars. You drive your electric car and you can park it and you can charge it. I haven't seen one yet for a bike.
Well, that's just, you haven't seen the electric scooter hubs.
No, I haven't.
Well, boringly, they're like bicycle hubs, except you plug your scooter in it, just
Yeah.
charge the scooter.
I just haven't seen those, and I don't think there are any around here.
No, there isn't. There's a few around. You can sort of find them and look.
I'd have to take my bicycle somewhere and use it, and
to go out and find it. Yeah, I know. Beats the point of it. Well, on the contrary, I think it actually is the point. So so you've got all these problems of basically trying to reduce traffic, but you've got to remember although you're pushing people away from the cars to do smaller journeys on bicycles and those sorts of things. You've still got to allow some cars to sort of, if you live in London and you want to go away, let's say for a holiday or something, then you still got to travel out.
Well, this is where you get those cars that you don't own, that you sort of not so much hire, but you can sort of
you rent.
You rent the car. Yes, you have a sort of a system whereby you can just use a car at the weekend. And there are some, in fact, that allow you to do a one-way car journey.
And so adapting, and what I think is what we're trying to get across, is that to decrease congestion is actually not to do one thing, is actually do quite a lot of things, a lot of small changes, adapting existing infrastructure, or adapting changes, trying to influence people to make different decisions and things. That's the way forward, as opposed to basically saying, the cars are evil, essentially, which is what.
But they are, in all fairness. Yeah, if I'm going to be taken off out of my car and I'm going to put on a bicycle, or I'm going to walk, and I'm walking on a pavement, or I'm riding on a road next to cars and lorries and buses and all the others, they come past me and they're pushing out loads of pollution, which is my fortune then to sort of be breathing in, because I'm following the back of a car, which is sort of pumping out sort of noxious fumes, and it's there for me to sort of breathe in.
So, but that just brings back the sort of, you separate the cars from the bikes, which is what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, that's just not really doing anything. That's just saying the same thing. Is you're not fixing the problem. You're merely.
Oh, I agree.
So you then sort of go, right, take the car away. But then, as I said, you can't make it unfriendly for cars, because, of course, you might need the car for once. So you can't just eliminate, to say, no more cars ever, which is, lots of these pedestrian zones and all sorts of things do. And sort of then you're basically taking away roads where cars could have been and concentrating the cars, which is worse. than
Yeah.
actually keeping them spread.
If you look
So-
at pollution levels near motorways, they're far higher than other roads.
I don't know. I've seen some of the roads in London. They're much worse than the motorways.
Yeah, we can see how filthy the roads are.
Yeah. So yeah, you're then got the problem. So that's one of the things. But you can do clever management. Like, I know one-way systems aren't looked at and nice, but one-way systems help. But it's also, you got to look at the flow of traffic. I know an area like where in Putney, that was the worst road for pollution, and the reason it was because it had 3 traffic lights on it, right? And basically, it was one would be red, and the 2 would be green, and then it would be go green, and then the middle of them would be red, and then it's and basically you just have this start and stop traffic where the traffic lights were not helping the flow of traffic and just basically keeping everybody stopped.
But that is easy to manage. That is something called traffic light management, and you can do that. It's just places don't do that. I know that I came from a city, Southampton, and they trialled a system whereby when the buses had bus lanes, the buses came along, and as the bus got near the traffic light sequence changed, and it was green, so the buses could just go through, and they could get to the centre of the city in record time, whereas all the other cars, now relegated from 2 lanes to 1 lane, were queuing up and spending ages. And they also then had the problem, this 1 lane was empty for probably about 10 minutes between each bus going through.
Yeah.
Not popular.
No, and this is the whole thing we're trying to get across, is that of like, there are these ideas and plans, but not one thing makes sense, or not doing just one thing. You got to do a combination of things, but you've also got to look what's right for your area. You can't just decide, right, we're going to make everything, single lane, or now you've just made 2 lanes of traffic, whether it's heavy, into a single lane. So then you spend more time in that lane sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, it's doing things like putting more buses on, but it's all right putting a bus on if you're near a bus route. But if you've got a sort of a 10-15 minute walk to the bus, and you decide you're going to go and do your shopping in town, you do your shopping in town, you get on a bus outside the shop, you take your bus to 20 minutes from your home, and then you've got to try and lug your shopping to your house. That doesn't work. It's got to be that they have to then change the bus routes to put buses basically much closer to everyone. And that then means even more buses.
Yeah.
And money.
And this is the whole crux of it. It boils down to money and who's going to pay for it. This is the whole, you've got to do these charges and things to help pay for it, because obviously these incentives, these measures are expensive. They are not, we're going to say profitable. That's the wrong way to get it, but sort of, you're spending money to promote health as opposed, or clean air, as opposed to earning to make any money on it. So,
well, the town where we lived, where many years ago we had a free park and ride. You parked and there was a bus and it would take you into the town. It was great, but it wasn't economically viable and it had to stop. Now I use the same system. I use the park and walk, and it takes me about 10-20 minutes to walk into town from parking this place. But then I'm lucky I still don't need to pay to park.
and that's just a whole other bombshell, is sort of, where do you put these cars? What are you going to do with these cars? They're just sitting around. Are you needing them? Could you put something else there? That's a whole different nut bombshell for later.
It is. Well, you've been listening to the Going Green podcast, where we've been talking about cars and air pollution. And next time, we'll come back next week with another topic. And until then, it's goodbye from me and
A goodbye from me.
bye-bye.
Bye.